Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us for Naiccon 2020's COM-eCON event. My name is Les Allen. I'm from GeekXP's Release the Geek podcast, and I also work with the ICON Comics and Games Convention in Johannesburg, South Africa. Joining me for this particular panel, Mustafa from Creative Frontiers. He's the CEO and founder of Creative Frontiers, a full-service creative agency that specializes in storytelling, education, training, and developing communication messages. And also Somto Ajuluchukwu, the founder of Vortex Corp, who's also a creative content company that exports African culture through comics, animation, and interactive media. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I hope I did you both justice with the introduction. Is that all right?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Not a problem at all. Gentlemen, the reason for this particular panel is we want to talk about the creative industries inside of Africa. People wanting to get their starts who are looking maybe towards the United States, looking towards Europe, as in, this is where I want to go, this is what I would like to do, but we want to help start building a path of what sort of skills might be out there. Mustafa, let's start with you. Can you please just go into a few minutes of what Creative Frontiers is about, the origin story, why this sort of storytelling education platform is important for you?
For sure. Thank you so much, Les. And hey to the audience. First and foremost, with Creative Frontiers, we set up Creative Frontiers in 2014. Prior to that, I was actually running a media school out in Pakistan, in Lahore, Pakistan, for the University of Lahore. So I've had a bit of a career where I've traveled around quite a bit. I lived in Congo for a little while. I'm very lucky to live in Kenya right now, and also experience Lahore, Pakistan, which is where my parents are from, and also to give back to my community as well. Creative Frontiers actually came about to support a little bit of a nomadic lifestyle of mine, where I could move around a little bit more. So that was the inception point. But really, it sort of grew on from there, and a couple of things grew that. First, we started off as a commercial entity, but very quickly realized that there was a lot of space to tell great stories about the places that we were working in. So places like Lahore, like Pakistan, places where you don't really see a lot of positive stories coming out of, unfortunately. So we actually started a division of Creative Frontiers called CFX Comics, which we launched to create comic books that were very much about telling local stories about people from that part of the world. That division grew, and we were supported through development, through some of our development clients, through development organizations such as USAID, and to work with young people to get their ideas in print and get them out there. And the program sort of continued to grow, and now it's actually become Comics for Peace, where we work with university students, run a fellowship program where they create these beautiful comics that I have over here. By the way, they're created by students that tell stories on various social issues that are impacting them. And like many parts of Africa and many parts of Asia, we have many social issues that young people want to talk about, and have very few platforms to talk about. So comic books are such an incredible medium because there's such a low barrier to entry, especially with digital comics now, that if you are a good writer, a good artist, with the right sort of motivation, you can get out there. You can create your content, and you are able to get it disseminated to a large audience. I feel that even beyond Asia, Africa has a huge amount of potential, mainly because you guys, like, especially as I'm in Nairobi, like the birthplace of M-Pesa, the fact that you actually have monetization channels over here, which we struggled with in South Asia, especially in Pakistan. You would think that with that huge a demographic, getting our content monetized would not be an issue, but there were a lot of regulatory constraints to be able to sell online, which which are a lot less here from my experience in Kenya and in fact in other parts of Africa. That sort of creates so if you could find an audience that can pay for it, even if they're paying $1 for it, if they can pay $1 for it, you've got your proof of concept. After that, it's just a matter of getting it out and getting it out to enough people that you are getting more money coming in.
Sure. There's a number of points there that I definitely want to explore here, especially like the nomadic lifestyle with COVID affecting the world the way that it is. The fact that you can now work from anywhere and get your work, it's been a trend for a long time of being from anywhere in the world, you can get your work out there. But COVID has now reinforced that you're working from home. But that also means that but companies like Creative Frontiers and Vortex can now tap the globe, tap the entire continent for the people that they want to work with. Somto, I'm going to open it up to you now. Tell us the story behind Vortex, because I'm pretty sure some of the things that Mustafa has talked about are going to be resonant with Vortex's origin story.
Oh yeah, most definitely. It was a pleasure listening to you, Mustafa. And I'm excited to get into your projects and dig deeper into those stories because you come from such diversity and experiences from across the continent. Vortex Corp was founded in 2015. We initially, it was the main vision and the mantra of the organization is to export African culture through comic books, animation, and interactive media. And so far, it's been quite an interesting journey, but it's also been quite challenging because making comic books and animation on the continent of Africa isn't exactly a walk in the park. It takes a lot of resilience, it takes a lot of patience, and it's a long game, but those were the ideals the company was founded on. I grew up watching a lot of cartoons and animation that were totally inspiring, but the stories weren't exactly relatable. And when I grew up, I realized how disconnected I was from my origins because of the cartoons and media I used to watch. It affected my accents, it affected the way I think, it affected my approach, and it consumed a larger part of my cultural makeup as a human being. And I realized the importance of content in the growing mind of the child, of the African child, of how content is the first connection to the child's imagination. That those cartoons that a kid is watching are seeds of imagination and seeds of creativity and thought seeds that kind of grow into the personality of this child. And, thinking about that, I realized that making comic books and making cartoons wasn't just a job, it was a responsibility to my people, to my continent, to my country, and telling these stories that more or less haven't been told anywhere, So really, those were the things that really inspired Vortex to get started. As we grew larger, as we grew older, I like to say, we realized that telling the stories wasn't enough. But it's what we had to do was also start growing the capacity of the industry and actually begin to discover our industry and tap deeper into the talents and the creativity that's around us so we can have a unified voice. And that's how we came about launching Vortex 247, which was formerly Vortex Comics, which was a single publisher. We had published a lot of comic books between 2015 to about 2018. And then we took a break through the middle of 2018 to 2019. And then we kind of recalibrated how we wanted to approach the market and what was the success curve for African comic books. And the the watchword that kept on coming to us was togetherness, unity, umoja, Ubuntu. And we began to think about it as a collective journey. And that's how we opened up a digital platform that gives access to African comic books across the continent. And this came naturally because we had really been in the industry. We had attended Comic Cons home and abroad across Africa. We had gained relationships with different publishers. So having those discussions and licensing that content and bringing it into one safe space where you could consume it like a digestible pill and get access to these content was something that the industry kind of understood, because they realized how niche the market was in their various locations. But if there was one place where you could read the comic book you know already and discover comic books that you don't know, it's a plus for everyone, because it garners a symbiotic relationship of somewhat. And that's how we got into, that was our perspective. And that has kind of also been our perspective so far. We've taken that same initiative of a collective industry to also organize art tournaments like the one we just concluded with Comic-Con Africa, where we want to discover new talent in digital art. We want to bring international eyes to this talent, with the kind of judges that we brought on a panel to judge this art and select the winners. We've just kind of grown into an understanding that it's not a Vortex journey anymore, but it's a journey of African creativity, which we are a part of. Yeah.
Sure. There's definite sympathetic themes across both companies. The idea of telling the stories that are local. And also interesting that the origin stories both start kind of around the same time, 2014, 2015. So I'm going to throw it back to Mustafa and say, it's 2014, you're at your origin point. The idea of creating comic books, you've mentioned that you're talking with university students, etc. So there would be storytellers, there would be artists. What are the differences between even 5 to 6 years ago and now? People who are wanting to maybe get their own comics out there, what sort of things were you seeing with the obstacles then that might have changed now? And Somto, I'll be asking you the same question. But Mustafa, what were those obstacles and how are they different between now and then?
So I think that it's very interesting that I just listened to your story, and I was sort of seeing the connecting points between, how we sort of both started with this desire to, tell indigenous stories, right? Tell like our stories from and give people a voice, but also to highlight various social issues that are within our part of the world. I think for us, like in 2014, the biggest challenge was that comic books were still considered very much an import, even in Africa and Asia, especially South Asia. East Asia obviously has a very long tradition of comic books with manga and with anime and all of that. Western comics have been around for so long, but we weren't really seeing a lot of comics from East Asia, from South Asia, or from parts of Africa. But however, I definitely have to say that a big point of the inspiration for me to set up and go into the comic book space for giving voice to people from my community really came from Kenya, a project over here called Shujaz that got set up in 2009. That where they use this medium very effectively to talk about issues that were affecting young people around the election at that point. For me, since our inflection point was in Pakistan, in fact, something I didn't mention earlier, one of the major inflection points for us was this incident that happened in Pakistan at that point, which was a terrorist attack that happened over there, where young people came in and they killed many young children. And what we wanted to do was really to be able to dissuade other young people from following that path, from becoming extremists. And we thought, well, how do we get the message out to them? and how do we get it where it's not regulated, where it's not, and where people don't really have access to social media. And that's where I encountered Shujas, and they were, using the good old print media, printing out those comics and getting them out there and creating this social conscience amongst young people.
Was it, how successful was that? I apologize for the interruption, Somto. I'm going to slightly change the question there because Mustafa's brought up a point which I think might be quite relevant with the situation in Nigeria right now. Mustafa, what was the efficacy? You're talking about wanting to help people understand the right message and go forward in the right way. How effective was the comic book as a conduit in this message?
So the medium was incredibly effective, mainly because when we were going out to, for example, Southern Punjab, which is where the access to where they probably never saw a comic book before, right. Giving young people something with images and something with stories that were right there, but pictures tell thousand words, right? So having those images right there, having those blurbs of text, they don't have to read too much, but they can read and follow a story, and they can then to make that story very relatable to them. Issues that with characters that look like that, with arguments that they've heard. I mean, it was very, very effective. In fact, with the studies that we conducted afterwards, we had a very rigorous M&E process. For the project, we found almost a 70% shift in attitudes and opinions amongst the people who received the content. And in fact, that project, it was a fairly well received project. We got written about. I don't want to brag here, but we got written about by Foreign Policy, by the New York Times, by various publications. What we found out was that having something that was as simple as pictures, images, and stories. I mean, this story is really the unit of human understanding, right? That's how we've always expressed ideas. Having that in that very amazing visual form, not only sort of like got attention immediately, they were sharing it. Some of them who couldn't read were actually trying to decipher the story and maybe even make up their own story as they were going on. It sort of had this surge of creativity and surge of sort of like, come out from that. And then when we expanded the program and made that a program where we were going to different universities, where we were talking to thousands of students, and then recruiting fellows who worked with us for a year, becoming part of a program to then create stories that were very much coming out from within them around the issues of radicalization, but really stories that they were experiencing around them, and for them, those students then go back to their universities and engage with their students with a product in hand and say, we've got a story to tell. What do you think about it? Let's have a conversation around it. It's been a very, very effective tool to create that sort of really powerful engagement. Sure. And also at the same time, it's been an incredible tool for on the commercial side for the students who are participants in this program. Many of them have found employment in the creative industries. We actually were able to take a few of them over to San Diego Comic-Con. We had a booth there. We got these comics attention. We were able to distribute them over there. We were able to put them on a panel. So really, build up their confidence in that sense. And also, now, I mean, the way I sort of see it for folks who want to look at it beyond to a large degree in 2015, when we were thinking of comic books, we were still thinking of it within the paradigm of it being it being a social product.
Right.
Mainly because it was such a new thing. It was very hard to find a commercial stream for it. There weren't enough producers, and I think as you at Vortex have probably find out, if there's no quantum of content, you can't really commercialize something. There's no quantum. You need to have the Netflix there to be able to charge a subscription, right? To have that amount of films and TV shows, or in this case, comic books. So for a lot of for Asia, for South Asia, for Kenya as well, this is still a pretty nascent industry. So it's hard to monetize it in that way. But to take the social angle, especially in 2015, I think was a pretty good step for us because we were able to get this into the public conscience. And now we have creators over here. Now we've got Naiccon over here, right? We've got this industry sort of thriving the last couple of years. 2015, who heard of Naiccon, right?
Yes.
Similarly, in Pakistan, we've got TwinCon there. We've got so many COM-eCons there.
Right.
All of this sort of like grew out of this sapling that was planted back then.
Yeah.
And again, a big challenge that we had, because even at that time, we were thinking, how do we commercialize this? Because you wanted to make sure this industry became something. For us, the challenge in South Asia was that it's, like which I mentioned earlier as well, that it's a very regulated, the payment gateways are very regulated.
Right.
And fit utilize. It's a very cash economy. It's not like over here where there's like Kenya where there's M-Pesa and everybody uses it. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, I've lived in Congo and they're using like something akin to M-Pesa there.
Sure.
But it's not something that you had in South Asia till like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Even in India, So now is like the perfect time. You have ways to get, you have enough penetration through pioneers like Vortex Corp to be able to, who've taken that first step of like rallying everybody together. People like, Thomas who've got Naiccon together.
Right.
Who've got that base there, and you've got a mechanism to receive payment, for your creative work. It's just a matter of getting it out there. And then you've got social media channels through which to propagate your content, and then interest from the world, because there's scarcity, right, in this part of the world. Like there's an appetite to see content that's not just the usual, Western or the Far Eastern, brands of comic, but to see something new come out as well.
We've got a lot there that we're going to let Somto pick from, because we've got Mustafa's brought up amazing points. There was the effect of the medium at a time of strife, that it was able to convey a message. Mustafa mentioned that there were people who were reading, and I use air quotes, reading the comics, who may not have been able to read, but were still able to discern a message from that. There was an incident in South Africa, well, I say incident, a couple of years ago, where the lawyers for a fruit picking farm actually changed the employment contract from text to a cartoon strip, showing easily that this is how much of the bag you need to fill per type of fruit, etc. That it was a medium that conveyed understanding without a lot of words, because not everybody was able to read that contract in English. So, Somto, I'm going to let you take your pick, because right now there's a situation in Nigeria where a lot of people are unhappy with what is happening here. So I'm going to let you take the reins of this conversation from this point. Mustafa's brought up the conveyance of story to help with messaging, payment platforms and development, having a slate of products in order to make commercialism viable. I'm going to let you, Somto, take which question you will and run with that.
I mean, to definitely, thank you so much, to definitely show solidarity to the things that are happening, especially the 2010-20 Lekki Toll massacre that happened literally in my city, just a few kilometers away from where I live. Unfortunately, I don't even know what it is, but I was at the studio during that time, which is outside town. So I was just on my phone hoping that my family was safe. And it was a horrifying feeling. But definitely, we've already even put our pain into comic books on the topic. We had a light comic strip that we could put out to communicate, why we're on the streets protesting, what we want from our government, and how we're not going to stop. And we kind of have been using art as a voice and as a tool for activism, and I feel like this tool has been used a lot, even from the greats like Marvel and DC. There was the Got Milk campaign, and there was there's they've used this comic books in so many, been using Captain America, Black Panther, as characters and icons that people can relate to see change within themselves and to see change around their community. So most definitely, comic books can definitely, through the right means and creative writing, can be used to convey a strong message to the audience and to the people and to the world. Looking into what was the other question? The general question?
We have so we initially opened up the second stage with Mustafa about the idea of what were the challenges 5 to 6 years ago during Vortex's origin story that people who are wanting to get into the comic book game, what challenges were they facing then, and how has that developed since then? But Mustafa also raised points about viability of business. That it's great to have content, but if somebody's not willing to pay you even the dollar, even the cost of a cup of coffee to get that product, there's only so long you can labor with love while you've got to put food on the table. So
most definitely.
Yeah. How has that situation worked with Vortex and the people that you've worked with?
The comic book industry in Africa is tough. It's tough, and it's come from a very long line of slow growth. When you think about it's slow growth, but it's moving, and to be honest, it's been like that globally. When you think about the comic books in the States, it's almost a century old. So that industry is well cooked. They've been through their ups and downs, and they're where they are now. So in Africa, we're just taking our turn. We're just doing our rounds and trying to get there, trying to develop as much intellectual property as we can that can one day seek commercial interest from the silver screen and other mainstream media. And then our stories become commercially viable to become merchandisable and, etc. So it's a business that is, it's a long-term investment. The comic book business is a long-term investment business. If you're thinking of getting your revenue back in 10 years, you might want to invest in tech and take that to Silicon Valley. But the comic book business is a lot of networking. When we first started in 2015, we started, I personally tried to make comic books since 2014 and I did not succeed. I kept on making horrible products. I wanted to curse, but this is Naiccon.
We'll keep this PG.
Yeah, we'll keep it PG. We had to. I went through a lot of iterations trying to create that one good comic book until I thought to myself that why am I trying to make a comic book when I don't have the experience to make what I want to consume? Because I'm just getting into this. So I decided to reach out to publishers and creators who had done this for longer. And then we got our first comic book out, which was 1, then it became 2, and it became 3, and now it's a lot. But one thing that you definitely have to understand is, coming into the industry, our biggest challenge was even understanding remotely how to bring the audience together. Even my generation of comic book creation in Nigeria, I found it easy because there was already a COM-eCON in Lagos that had been going on for 3-4 years. There were publishers ahead of me that I'd been able to understudy and see what they were doing, like Comic Republic and ICS comic books and Elixir comic books, which is now Spoof Comics. So I'd be able to see Kwesi Oloysom Kezi from South Africa do it. I've been able to see Royal Coupe from Unique Studios do it. So I had a lot of people that I'd watched, I'd seen their steps, and I was able to skip a whole lot of steps watching them. So one thing you definitely have to do coming into the business is study. You want to study what has existed, and with that knowledge, build on that. So the biggest problem 5 years ago that we faced was trying to force ourselves to make print comic books. Print comic books are amazing, but we realized that it's event type of sales methodology. So if you're trying to attend a comic con, then you do your prints, right? In a country like Nigeria, where we don't have any comic book store, at least in Kenya, you have WLL, which is what's his name, Mutundi, right? And you have some other guys who run a comic book store out there in Nairobi. You know, in South Africa, even less has 2 comic book stores. So those are more advanced places where they at least you have a place where you can sell through the year. But in a place like Nigeria, where you only get to sell a Comic-Con, one of the biggest challenges we had was making print comic books and storing it in your shelf. Stacks and stacks of print comic books that didn't get to sell out from the Lagos Comic-Con, and you take that through. But we discovered, understudying the industry and looking at people like Comic Republic do digital comics and see the way they release their digital comic books, we began to form our model for digital comic books. Okay. And we created a model that, looking at Peter and looking at Paul, we brought something together that brings a breath of fresh air, which was an Octave series then, which was 8-page comics. And with 8-page comics, we created a title called Strike Guard, which after a year of publishing those 8-page comics, we were listed on Comic Book Resources as top 15 most influential Black superheroes.
Nice.
Alongside Black Panther and Static Shock and the rest of them. And it was just the consistency. We realized that consistency was one of the biggest problems of our generation making comic books, and we needed to kill that bug. We needed to show that we can make comic books and run it 12 issues deep, run it 20 issues deep, run it 30 issues deep, and even have follow-up stories, origin stories, spin-off stories. Mm-hmm. We need to show them that this is a universe that you can invest your time in. This is a universe of characters that you can dedicate yourself to, that you can wear a Strike Guard shirt and beat your chest and be like, this character got me, because I know this character, I've read a lot of material about this character, and it also went into our method of marketing. We were always trying to get into, 5 years ago, we're always worrying about, sorry for the beeping sound, TIA, please, pardon me.
Sorry.
For the longest time, we were always trying to focus on getting more audience. We need more people. And we realized that we forgot that we were not even catering to the people that were at our doorstep.
Right.
So we started to focus more on community development. What are our fans doing? How are we engaging them other than just throwing comic books in their face? Read. We started to create activities for them. We started to use social media as a more interactive tool than a marketing tool. Of course, it serves as a marketing tool by nature, but then what is its personality week in, week out, day in, day out? What is it communicating to the audience? So we began to see that as our voice piece and our hand, which we could use to touch and feel our audience, know who they are, know what they like, know what they want to read, when they want to read. And this even forced us to develop our website as a tool, not just for displaying our content, but also collecting data from our audience. Data is one of the biggest problems of the African comic book industry. We don't have the numbers of where the audience are. We don't know how old these people are. We don't know the gender of these people, And without that key information, we can't follow up on the kind of stories that they wanna read. Sure. Especially if we're looking at this as a commercial venture where we're trying to sell to them. So if we're trying to sell to them, it needs to be about them and less about us.
Right. You brought up a number of topics across both of you gentlemen. Brought up a number of topics about the business model of what it takes to make a successful comic publishing enterprise. And as Somto has said, that when you start moving into this, there's so much to learn. Like in any particular business you try to enter into, there's your marketing, there's your cost overheads, there's revenue generation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
The new generation, or the next generation of people, or people who might be wanting to get into the comic book industry, the idea of self-publishing might be a bit daunting, but working with somebody like Creative Forces or working with like somebody with Vortex helps bridge that gap. You guys have already started making those sort of commercial and business platforms that can launch other people. So the question that I'm going to ask Mustafa and Somto, when somebody approaches you and says, I have an idea, what are the key skills that you're looking for? Somto already said that you've got a graft. There are famous stories like Jim Lee. Jim Lee got discovered at San Diego Comic-Con. But Jim Lee had already put in hours and hours of work studying the human body and drawing it and practicing, etc. Also, somebody can come in with a great story, but sometimes that needs a bit of a polish. Mustafa, if somebody was to come to you, what sort of skills would you want them to have, either artist or illustrator? What do you need them to have? And what would you want them to start developing as well?
So thank you. That's such a great question, Les. In fact, our fellowship program sort of started from this desire to harness the creative and the writing potential, and to be able to develop that over a sustained period of time. Because like Somto just mentioned, that it takes such a long time, and for us, what we wanted to do was to be able to pass that on in sort of almost like a university-style, rigorous one-year program. What we're normally looking for, we actually have this when we open up our applications for our fellowship program, for when students come and join that, we're looking for, first of all, for good writing talent. And that, if you can't tell us if your story is, at the end of the day, your pictures, your images, your videos, your animation, your film are conveying a story, and that has to be told right. So I would say good writing is the bedrock of any media industry.
Right.
If you want to create a great comic book, get a great writer. If you're a good artist, or if you're a good writer, collaborate with a great writer.
How do you also manage Mustafa, I'm going to ask you right there, how do you manage expectations? You've got somebody who thinks, I have the next X-Men, I have the next Black Panther. How do you help manage expectations for somebody coming to you?
So we normally never take full written comics. We tell them that that's going to be part of the 1-year process, that they're going to be creating a comic by the end of it. It's not going to happen on the first day. We want you to write a short story that's just going to be about an idea. Put it to us in a compact, succinct form. Give us a start, middle, and end in one page. And if you can do that, you can write a 13-page, 16-page story, a comic book story as well.
Is this what the fellowship helps develop? So somebody applies, yes. They've got some ideas, you identify that talent. Your fellowship, which is a year long, is that correct?
Yeah, it's a year-long fellowship, and what we do is that we pair them up with artists, we pair them up with creatives, and then they're mentored by senior artists, senior creatives from our organization and some of the partners that we had. For our last fellowship program, we had Joshua Dysart, the creator of who's worked on a number of really amazing properties, including Hellboy. He was one of the mentors. We had Kaya Ahmed, who's worked on Miss Marvel, mentoring myself and a couple of other people as well from the creative space, sort of mentoring these students. For our next program, we'll have a similar sort of cohort and a similar sort of mentorship stable. And the idea is to really sort of like, instead, especially for more nascent industries, we're going to feel like having this sort of like very tailored sort of approach to, to take them from the inception all the way to execution. Almost think of it like a startup incubator. where you're sort of like taking them through the entire process and then giving them a platform to get that exposure. Because like Somto mentioned, that getting that exposure is one of the harder parts as well, right? Like, how do you build an audience, and how do you get to the right platforms like Naiccon, like San Diego Comic-Con, where you can build an audience. Interestingly enough, like, I kind of feel like, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, we almost have the ability to short circuit some of the more traditional and disrupt some of the more traditional ways in which we've been marketing and promoting comic books. I mean, I'm seeing many of my fellows who sort of graduated through our program are actually being very successful creating very short form comics on Instagram. Like, literally like 1 to 2 pages of stories of, like, I wouldn't say memes, but like story-based comics that they've been able to build an audience around, and then to translate that onto a YouTube channel and all of that stuff as well, and also use TikTok. If you could convey a story in 15 seconds through images, through animation, it's, at the end of the day, you're telling a story, right?
Matthew Smith, artist in the United States. During COVID, there was not a lot of work coming through. He's actually worked with Ron Mars on the Beast of the Black Hand Kickstarter recently. He started developing his own comic book, but he published it 4 pages at a time on Twitter, because Twitter can only take 4 images. So he had those 4 pages, and they were the weekly installments. And in 6 weeks, he had his full story, but you got to read it a bit at a time. So thinking outside the box, like an Instagram story or a TikTok story, is a great way to start getting your ideas out there.
Exactly. And then now with Patreon and with, there are new monetization channels that you don't necessarily have to sell a comic in the more traditional sense.
Yes.
And can get an audience through alternative means as well. So that's, I mean, for our next, we're thinking of our next fellowship program, we're really developing around the idea of sort of introducing new avenues for monetization for the cohort that is going to be part of our program. Because that's like selling, as Somto also, has been grappling with this, that selling the comic in the traditional sense, especially selling print, first of all, I personally feel that in this day and age, hey, let's look out for our, for nature. Let's look out for our forests. Let's use as less paper as we can. We all have smartphones. We can all access content. Comic books, especially when somebody's starting off with comic books, it's always the trouble is, how do you get that initial quantum of content out there, especially when the media are not very well, the dissemination platforms are not very well defined. If you can sort of disrupt them and have, and be able to leverage the social media channels, but then also leverage these other monetization platforms like Patreon, I think that is a direction to go in for a lot of the independent content creators. Today, I think that these platforms are all independent content creators, and I think that content is king at the end of the day, and the lesser, the less middlemen that we have between content and audience, the better, right?
Sure.
Or at least, I mean, obviously YouTube is still a middleman and Facebook is still a middleman in a way, but at least to a certain degree, I mean, because their scale and because of the audiences that they have, there's at least a more ability, I think, that content can actually find an audience now than maybe even 2-3 years down, 2-3 years ago.
Thank you very much. As I move across to Somto, there was I'm reminded of a point from previous conversations with comic book industry people, that the ability to hit a deadline is valued more important than talent. So if you're going to start doing stuff like putting content out onto Instagram or out onto YouTube or TikTok, you need to be consistent, because the moment you are no longer consistent, then it starts developing a reputation, a negative reputation for you. So if you need to start hitting deadlines, it's a question I ask regularly: is perfect the enemy of done? And I believe it was Andy Lanning who actually said last week, yeah, nothing will get you out of your perfectionist zone than a deadline. So having that particular model will also help instill that skill. Somto, how are you managing the expectation of people who want to come work with you? What skills are you looking for? And what are you looking for people to want to develop inside of themselves when you might want to start working with somebody?
Most definitely, I would definitely say that when it comes to deadlines and creating content, not to disappoint your audience, you need to understand yourself as a producer and as your organization, the capacity of your organization. There is no gun to your head that tells you have to bring out comic books every week, like Marvel or DC, or every month even. You can bring it out every quarter. You know, the most important thing is that the next quarter, make sure you're bringing it out again and better. You know, and the next quarter, make sure you're doing it again and better. And that's how it goes. You know, as I said, understudying people like Royal Coupe, he started with doing 2 Kickstarters a year. You know, and he makes a graphic novel with every Kickstarter that he does. And he did the first one a year. The next year he did 2, and now he does 3 back to back to back. 4, because he does it every 3 months. You know, so his propensity has increased, and that's in the same vein how we advanced as well. You know, we started with doing 1 book, and then it increased. And sometimes we didn't even make the deadline, but those are bad days. Those
are bad days. We don't talk about them.
Let's leave those bad days. You know, but definitely as a creator, when we're looking for creators to come on board the Vortex, the first thing that we're looking at from you is what's the fan engagement for your comic book? You know, what can the fans hold on to about your story that's going to make them fanatics?
Right.
You know, the character design, how unique is it? Has it been seen before? You know, we start visually before we even get into the story, because we can always throw writers at you and upgrade your story if you have a really cool character with a backstory. So most of the time, a comic book creator comes with this major protagonist character and a really great power set. He's like, oh, he can do this and that. And we're like, whoa, that's cool. What's his backstory? Well, he goes into this lab and then there's this radiation and I'm like, oh wow, just like the rest of the 300,000 stories that are out there.
Was it the same accident that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles
exactly.
were at?
Or was it the same one that Powerpuff Girls had? Which one? Like, can you help me?
It was all the same one.
You know, so yeah, that's we try to first understand you know, the lovability of your character, the storytelling, you know, the longevity of your story as well. If you're making a comic book series and not a graphic novel, your story has to have longevity. You know, how long can we push this comic book series? Sure. You know, how far can we push it? And then also the depth of the universe, the development of the characters, secondary characters, primary characters, villains. Villains are so important. All these tiers of characters. How can we draw more stories from them? Because once someone has fallen in love with your title and it's paying me on my platform, I want to be able to bring out more stories from that same title, because people already follow that. I don't want to come up with something new. I just want to hire a writer and tell him, like, look at this character within this story. Can you make something from that? Yeah. Do you get what I mean? And they're like, oh yeah, sure, we're gonna do that. Then me looking for like, oh, I need another creator. You know, it's easier for me to actually develop what already exists and works, you know? So, which is what I said initially with focusing on my community that exists.
Yeah. And
because the most aggressive marketing is word of mouth. So I'm counting on my existing community to tell their friends that, look, these guys, you might not have liked Strike Guard, that's my thing, but this new guy that they just brought out from the Strike Guard story, you're going to like this guy. Do you get what I mean?
This speaks to Mustafa's point about having the quantum, having this slate.
Exactly.
It's not just one basic idea, you've got to have more. I think Mustafa even mentioned that Netflix is looking for 6 pieces of content. I can find one piece of content anywhere. Where is the rest of your world?
Exactly. So we definitely look into that when we are creating, when we are looking for creators. For artists, I feel like it's pretty much simple. We just look for talented artists. We're excited about young artists because they have an ability to grow. They're also less stressful and less demanding than a grown-up artist that has a whole lot of demands. They're like, oh, where are you gonna put me? I want to live in a 5-star suite. I'm like, yo, well, we can't afford that, So we were excited about young talent that is excited about growing and excited about creating.
Right.
And can work within the industry standard budget, because the industry isn't making a lot of money off comic books now. So we have to be very careful about the skill set that we hire. With comic books, I've never looked at it as something I have to do to impress, or something I have to do to sort of throw a weight around the industry to say we make this level of quality. I'm really just focused on my audience. If they like what we're producing, then we keep producing what we're producing. If we put it out there and they're like, oh, we love the story, but the art could have been a little bit better, then we know that's what we improve on. We have a standard, which is a standard level of content quality that we maintain. But we don't go after trying to hire a Mohamed Agbadi or a Harrison Tombra. These are popular artists in Nigeria, to do our artworks, because there's so much talent that exists and they have their own market and people who employ them. And we're not at that level yet. We just need to understand our budget level.
Yes.
And so we maintain a business, and we just don't create to we don't create in debt,
Yeah.
Those are things that we're definitely looking for in artists.
I think we are coming up close to time. I think that's pretty comprehensive. You've set your expectations for somebody who's coming in with a story and somebody who's coming in with art skills. Now we know this is what you should. We're managing expectations as well.
Yeah.
No one's walking in with the $350,000 signing bonus that Eric Larson and Jim Lee got. It's not. We're not quite there yet.
Exactly.
Mustafa and Somto, I want to say thank you very much. I'm going to ask for one last piece of advice from both of you. So, Mustafa, to anybody out there who might be thinking of wanting to get into the comic book industry, what is your 30-second piece of advice?
Start creating. I mean, just those 2 words. I mean,
Just create.
If you have a good idea, make sure it's a great story. Start from there, and then build it from there. This is the best time to get your story out there. Start with few expectations, and like you said, Les, start with keep your expectations grounded. This is very nascent in this part of the world, this industry, but you could still be a pioneer in this industry. That's the best part of it. So you really build it.
And before I move across to Somto, Mustafa Husnain, where can people find out more about Creative Frontiers and your fellowship?
Sure. comicsforpeace.com is where we have our fellowship website. And Creative Frontiers is www.cfrontiers.co. comicsforpeace.com and CFX Comics. I mean, that's where you need to go. We will be putting up next year, early next year, call for a new cohort. We are looking at even starting a cohort over here in Nairobi. So let's see.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Somto, your 30-second piece of advice to anybody looking to start making their own content.
Most definitely, my advice to you would be dream big, start small. Dream big, start small. Focus on being consistent. Focus on your audience. Don't look around you. Nothing's happening around you. Do your thing. Be consistent. and focus on being consistent and your audience. And it's natural. It's a natural progression of things. Yeah.
Somto, thank you very much. Where can people find out more about Vortex Corp?
To find out about all the businesses under Vortex Corp, it's just vortexcorp.net. That's VORTEXCORP.net. And to access our digital subscription platform for comic books across the continent, is vortex247.com. That's vortex247.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Mustafa, Husnain, Somto, Ajuluchukwu, thank you so much, both of you, for spending some time sharing your industry knowledge. It's very much appreciated. We'd like to thank you.
It's a pleasure.
We'd like to thank you for being attendees at Naiccon 2020 COM-eCON.
Yeah, thank you so much, Les. Appreciate you.
Gents, we're going to cut it there. I'm going to upload these to the guys in Nairobi. They're going to do the editing. Are you guys okay with that? Was that okay?
Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
Excellent. There will be more emails to you about when the session will be dropping, anything else you want to add, any links, anything at all. So, Somto, I think you know that from a Naiccon perspective, they've got a very good relationship with Radio NRG, and they push stuff out constantly. Mustafa, I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
No.
Yeah, so Radio NRG in Nairobi is tight, really tight with the Naiccon crew. When we were there last year, we were in the branded car, taken to the radio station, doing the interviews. They get a lot of mileage through Radio NRG. So the fact that you're there, any of your stuff, make sure you get links and stuff like that, both of you. Make sure you get your links and stuff like that to Thomas so he can make sure they get included, etc. And I'll be in touch with the next couple of days as well with follow-ups for you both.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Gents, thank you so much. I'm going to go and brave...